Admiral Kethvar stood on the command bridge of his mighty warship and watched another world burn. The fires below painted orange streaks across his dark face as he smiled with satisfaction. 300 years his people had ruled the stars, and now another planet belonged to them. The humans on New Haven Colony had fought hard for 3 weeks, but their simple weapons could not stop the Zilanian Empire. His ship was called the Sovereign's Wrath, and it was the largest vessel in his fleet. Around him, 300 other warships waited in perfect formation above the dying human world. Their plasma cannons had melted the cities, and their energy shields had stopped every human attack. The small colony had tried everything they could think of, but bullets and bombs meant nothing against Zilanian technology. Kethvar clicked his mandibles together as he remembered the battle. The humans had surprised him with their courage, but courage alone could not win wars. They had ships, but they were slow and weak. They had weapons, but they barely scratched Zilanian armor. They had shields, but plasma fire cut through them like paper. Now their cities were ash, and their people would become slaves. The communication officer turned toward him with news he had been waiting for. The final human transmission was coming through the speakers now, and it was exactly what he expected to hear. Governor Jake Morrison of New Haven Colony was ready to surrender. His voice sounded tired and broken as he spoke the words that meant his world was lost forever. This is Governor Morrison speaking for all the people of New Haven. We cannot fight anymore. We surrender to your forces and beg you to stop the bombing. Please do not hurt our children and families. We will do whatever you ask of us. Kethvar felt the familiar pleasure that came with victory. Another species had learned their place in the universe, and another world would feed the Empire with resources and labor. The humans seemed strong and clever, so they would make good workers in the mines and factories. Some might even be useful as soldiers if they proved loyal enough. He was about to order his landing forces to begin collecting prisoners when something impossible happened. His sensor officer suddenly made a sound of pure terror and pointed at his instruments with all 4 of his shaking hands. The readings on the screen made no sense at all. Admiral, there is something coming out of hyperspace. The energy signature is massive, much bigger than anything in our records. Whatever it is will be here in seconds. Before Kethvar could respond, the space in front of them split open like a wound. A ship emerged from the tear in reality that was unlike anything the Zilanians had ever seen. It was huge and wedge-shaped and covered in strange angular armor that seemed to absorb light. Weapon ports dotted its surface like the eyes of some ancient predator, and it moved with deadly grace despite its enormous size. The vessel was nearly 2,000 meters long, which made it larger than most Zilanian battle stations. But what shocked Kethvar most was the symbol painted on its hull. It was human writing and human markings, which should have been impossible. The humans were primitives with barely functional technology. They could not build something like this. Before he could make sense of what he was seeing, a voice filled every speaker on every ship in his fleet. The words were spoken in perfect Zilanian, but the accent was unmistakably human. The tone was calm and controlled, but carried an undertone of barely restrained anger that made Kethvar's blood run cold. This is Captain Ryan Clark of the Terran Defense Force Battleship Liberty. You have attacked a human colony without any reason or justification. You have murdered innocent civilians and destroyed their homes. This ends now. You have exactly 1 minute to withdraw all your forces from this system or face the consequences. Laughter burst from Kethvar's throat before he could stop it. The sound echoed through his bridge as his officers stared at him in confusion. 1 ship against 300 was suicide, even if that ship was unusually large. The humans had clearly gone insane with desperation. Human Captain, this is Admiral Kethvar of the Zilanian Imperial Fleet. You are outnumbered 300 to 1 by the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Your vessel is impressive, but it cannot possibly stand against our combined firepower. Surrender now and your death will be quick. Continue this foolishness and we will take you apart piece by piece. The human's response came immediately, and his voice had not changed at all. There was no fear or uncertainty in his words, only calm determination that somehow made Kethvar feel uneasy. I warned you, Admiral, you should have listened. Kethvar was about to order his fleet to destroy the human ship when his sensor officer screamed another warning. Massive energy spikes were building throughout the enemy vessel, as unknown weapon systems came online. The readings were unlike anything in Zilanian databases, and the power levels involved seemed impossible for a single ship to generate. Admiral, they are charging some kind of magnetic acceleration system. The energy output is enormous. I have never seen anything like this before. All ships prepare for combat. Destroy that vessel immediately. But even as Kethavar gave the order, he felt something he had not experienced in decades of warfare. For the first time since joining the Imperial fleet, he was afraid. The human ship hung in space like a sleeping giant, and he suddenly realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare might be wrong. The Liberty's weapons spoke with thunder that rolled across space itself. 12 projectiles launched from magnetic cannons struck the Zilanian formation before anyone could react. They were not energy beams or plasma bolts, but solid tungsten slugs accelerated to impossible speeds. The kinetic energy released when they hit their targets was beyond anything the Zilanians had ever encountered. 3 heavy cruisers simply ceased to exist. They were there one moment and gone the next, leaving only expanding clouds of superheated gas. 2 more ships were cut in half by the impacts, as if a giant blade had sliced through them. The shockwaves sent smaller vessels spinning out of control as their crews struggled to understand what had just happened. Kethavar stared at his tactical display in complete shock. 5 ships destroyed by weapons that did not register as energy discharges. His science officer's voice trembled as he tried to explain the impossible. Sir, those were solid projectiles moving at 15% of light speed. The kinetic energy from each impact equaled our most powerful plasma torpedoes. But how they accelerated solid matter to such velocities is beyond our understanding. The Biao human ship turned toward them with predatory grace, and Kethavar knew with terrible certainty that his 300-year-old empire had just met something it could not defeat. Captain Ryan Clark stood calmly on the bridge of the TDF Liberty as his crew prepared for battle. Around him, his officers worked with quiet efficiency, born from years of training and preparation. They had been waiting for this moment for decades, and now the time had finally come to show the galaxy what humans could do when pushed too far. Lieutenant Amy Foster looked up from her tactical station where she had been studying the enemy formation. 300 ships was a large fleet by any standard, but the Liberty had faced worse odds before. The Terran Defense Force had spent 50 years preparing for this war, and they were ready for anything the Zilanians could throw at them. Captain, we are receiving another transmission from the enemy commander, reported Communications Officer Ben Carter from his station near the rear of the bridge. His fingers moved across his controls as he isolated the signal and prepared to put it on the main screen. The view screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Kethavar in all his alien menace. The Zilanian's chitinous features were twisted with arrogance and cruel amusement as he looked at the human crew. His 4 eyes glowed with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle in his long career of conquest. Human Captain, I am Admiral Kethavar of the Zilanian Empire. You have made a grave mistake coming here with only 1 ship against my entire fleet. I offer you one final chance to surrender before we reduce your vessel to scrap metal. Your technology may be impressive, but you are still vastly outnumbered. Ryan's expression never changed as he listened to the aliens' threats. He had heard similar words from a dozen different species over the years, and they all said the same things. Numbers meant nothing when you had superior firepower, and the Zilanians were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Admiral Kethavar, you were warned to leave this system. You chose to ignore that warning and continue your attack on civilians. Now you will face the consequences of that decision, Ryan replied in a steady voice. He turned to his weapons officer with a slight nod. Lisa, you may fire when ready. Lieutenant Lisa Murphy's hands danced over her targeting controls as she locked onto the nearest group of enemy vessels. The Liberty's magnetic accelerator cannons began charging with a deep harmonic hum that vibrated through every deck and bulkhead. The sound was like the growl of some enormous predator preparing to strike. Firing Mac batteries 1 through 12, Lisa announced as she pressed the firing sequence. 12 tungsten slugs weighing 20 tons each erupted from the Liberty's main guns. They had been accelerated to 15% of light speed by the ship's massive magnetic coils, and they crossed the distance to their targets in less than 2 seconds. The Zilanians barely had time to register the energy signatures before the round struck home with devastating effect. 3 cruisers vanished in brilliant flashes of light as the kinetic impacts vaporized their hulls completely. The energy released was equivalent to small nuclear weapons, but concentrated into areas no larger than a person's fist. 2 more ships were torn apart as the projectiles punched clean through their armor and continued on to strike vessels behind them. Admiral Kethvar watched his tactical display in growing horror as 5 of his best ships disappeared from the screen. The impacts had generated electromagnetic pulses that interfered with his sensors, making it difficult to understand exactly what had happened. His science officer was frantically trying to analyze the weapon signatures. Sir, the humans appear to be using some form of magnetic acceleration system to fire solid projectiles at relativistic velocities. Each round carries kinetic energy equivalent to our largest plasma torpedoes, but without any of the energy signatures we are trained to detect and counter. How is such a thing possible? Kethvar demanded as he watched the human ship turn toward another group of his vessels. The power requirements alone should be beyond what any single ship can generate. Unknown, sir. Their power systems must be far more advanced than we assumed. And sir, there is something else. Our plasma weapons appear to be completely ineffective against their defensive systems. As if to prove the science officer's point, the entire Zelanian fleet opened fire at once. Thousands of plasma bolts and energy beams lanced across space toward the Liberty. The combined firepower was enough to crack a moon, but when it struck the human vessel's shields, it simply dispersed harmlessly into space. Their deflector screens are absorbing our entire bombardment with no apparent strain, reported the tactical officer with barely concealed panic in his voice. It is as if our weapons do not exist to them. Captain Ryan Clark watched the enemy barrage wash over his ship's shields without concern. Human deflector technology had been specifically designed to handle particle beams and plasma weapons after studying captured Zelanian equipment. The aliens had made the mistake of relying on energy-based weapons for so long that they had forgotten how devastating simple kinetic force could be. Continue firing all batteries, Ryan ordered calmly as the Liberty's guns spoke again. Another volley of relativistic projectiles tore through the enemy formation, destroying 6 more ships in brilliant explosions. The Zelanian fleet was already beginning to lose cohesion as individual captains realized their weapons were useless. Sir, several enemy vessels are attempting to ram us, reported Amy Foster as she tracked the incoming ships on her display. They appear to be making suicide runs since their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Activate point defense systems. Do not let them get close enough to cause damage. The Liberty's secondary weapons came online with deadly precision. Laser clusters designed to intercept incoming missiles locked onto the approaching Zelanian ships and opened fire. The high-energy beams sliced through the enemy hulls like knives through paper, stopping the suicide runs long before they could pose any threat. Admiral Kethvar realized with growing despair that his fleet was being systematically destroyed by a single enemy vessel. His most powerful weapons could not even scratch the human ship's defenses, while their kinetic cannons tore through his best armor like it was made of paper. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had never faced an enemy like this. All ships, scatter, and attempt to flank the enemy vessel, he ordered desperately. Use evasive maneuvers and try to overwhelm their targeting systems with multiple attack vectors. But the Liberty's fire control computers tracked every Zelanian ship with ease. The magnetic accelerator cannons swiveled on their mounts to engage targets across a wide arc, while the ship's advanced sensors penetrated every attempt at stealth or deception. Another volley reduced 8 more vessels to expanding debris clouds. Sir, we have lost over 60 ships in less than 10 minutes. His tactical officer reported in a voice that cracked with fear. At this rate, the entire fleet will be destroyed within the hour. Kethvar looked at the tactical display and saw 300 years of Zelanian supremacy crumbling before his eyes. The humans had not only matched their technology, they had surpassed it completely. Their weapons were more powerful, their defenses were impenetrable, and their ship moved with a grace that spoke of engineering far beyond anything in the Empire's database. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethvar considered the possibility that the Zelanian Empire might not be invincible after all. What followed could hardly be called a battle in any traditional sense. The TDF Liberty moved through the Zelanian fleet like a predator among helpless prey. Every few minutes its magnetic accelerator cannons would speak with thunder, and another group of enemy ships would be reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma and twisted metal debris. Admiral Kethvar stood frozen on his bridge watching 3 centuries of Zilanian military dominance crumble in real time. His tactical display showed ship after ship vanishing from existence as the human vessel continued its methodical destruction. The alien's 4 eyes tracked the carnage with growing horror as he realized that everything he had believed about warfare was wrong. "Admiral, we have lost over 100 ships," his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic in his voice. "Our weapons are completely useless against their defensive systems. Every shot we fire is absorbed or deflected, while their projectiles punch through our strongest armor like it does not exist. How are they accelerating solid matter to such impossible speeds?" Kethvar demanded as he watched another squadron of his cruisers disappear in brilliant flashes of light. "The physics alone should make such weapons impossible to build." His science officer frantically worked at his station, trying to understand the human technology, but the readings made no sense according to everything the Zilanians knew about space combat. "Sir, they appear to be using magnetic fields of incredible strength to launch projectiles at relativistic velocities. The power output required should overload any known reactor system, but their ship shows no signs of strain." Captain Ryan Clark maintained his calm demeanor as his crew systematically dismantled the enemy fleet. This was exactly what they had trained for during 50 years of preparation. The Terran Defense Force had studied every aspect of Zilanian military doctrine and designed their ships specifically to counter alien technology. "Sir, multiple enemy vessels are attempting to retreat toward the hyperspace limit," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her tactical station. Her display showed nearly 50 Zilanian ships breaking formation and fleeing toward the edge of the system where they could safely jump to hyperspace. "Let them run," Ryan replied calmly. "They will carry word of what happened here back to their empire. That should give otherworlds some hope that the Zilanians can be defeated. But not every alien commander was ready to abandon the fight." Admiral Kethvar's flagship Sovereign's Wrath still held position at the center of what remained of his fleet. Around him, nearly 200 ships continued to pour ineffective fire at the human battleship, while smaller vessels made desperate ramming attempts that were cut down by laser point defenses. "Sir, the enemy flagship is moving to intercept us," Amy reported as she tracked the massive Zilanian vessel on her screens. "It appears Admiral Kethvar wants to engage us directly." Ryan studied the tactical display with interest. The Sovereign's Wrath was nearly as large as the Liberty and heavily armed with the latest Zilanian weapons. It would be interesting to see if their flagship could put up more of a fight than the rest of the fleet. "All batteries focus fire on the approaching flagship," he ordered. "Let us see what their best ship can do." 6 tungsten projectiles streaked across space toward Kethvar's vessel, moving at incredible speed. The Zilanian admiral watched them approach on his tactical display, knowing there was nothing he could do to stop them. His ship's defensive systems were designed to intercept energy weapons, not solid projectiles moving at 15% of light speed. The round struck the Sovereign's Wrath with devastating effect. 2 punched completely through the ship's armored hull, leaving perfectly circular holes that vented atmosphere and debris into space. A third detonated one of the main plasma conduits, causing a chain reaction that destroyed an entire weapon deck. The flagship shuddered under the impacts but somehow remained intact. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 15, his damage control officer reported as emergency klaxons wailed throughout the ship. "We have lost main power to the forward weapon arrays and life support is failing in multiple sections." Kethvar realized that his flagship was dying around him, but he refused to give up. 300 years of Zilanian dominance could not end here with a single human ship. There had to be something they could do, some weakness they could exploit. "All remaining ships concentrate fire on that vessel," he ordered over the fleet communication channel. "Overwhelm their shields with everything we have. There must be limits to their defensive capabilities." Nearly 150 Zilanian warships opened fire simultaneously. The combined energy output was enough to sterilize a planet, but when it struck the Liberty's deflector shields, it dispersed harmlessly into space. The human vessel continued its steady advance without even slowing down. "Their shields are not even fluctuating under our bombardment," reported the science officer, in a voice filled with despair. Whatever technology they are using, it is completely beyond our understanding. On the Liberty's bridge, Lieutenant Lisa Murphy continued her methodical targeting of enemy vessels. The ship's fire control computers tracked dozens of targets simultaneously, while the magnetic accelerator cannon swiveled to engage threats across multiple vectors. Each shot was precisely calculated for maximum destructive effect. "Firing batteries 7 through 18, she announced as another volley of kinetic projectiles erupted from the ship's weapon ports. 12 more Zilanian vessels vanished in brilliant explosions as 20-ton tungsten slugs tore through their hulls at relativistic speeds. "Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from multiple enemy commanders," reported Communications Officer Ben Carter as his station lit up with incoming transmissions. "Several ship captains are requesting permission to withdraw from the battle." Ryan considered the requests for a moment before responding. The goal was not to commit genocide, but to demonstrate that the Zilanian Empire could be defeated. Allowing some ships to escape would spread word of the human victory throughout the galaxy. "Tell them to power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded for prisoner transfer," he decided. "Any ship that attempts to flee or continues fighting will be destroyed immediately." Admiral Kethvar watched in disbelief as ship after ship in his fleet powered down their weapons and began broadcasting surrender signals. In 3 centuries of conquest, no Zilanian force had ever surrendered to an enemy. The very concept was alien to their military doctrine. "Sir, our fleet is disintegrating," his tactical officer reported with something approaching hysteria in his voice. "We have lost over 200 ships, and the survivors are surrendering rather than continue fighting." Kethvar looked at his tactical display and saw the truth he had been trying to deny. The Zilanian Empire was not invincible. They had finally encountered an enemy that could not only match their technology, but surpass it completely. 300 years of easy victories had made them complacent and unprepared for real resistance. "Signal the retreat," he ordered quietly. "All remaining ships fall back to the hyperspace limit. We must warn the Supreme Chancellor about what we have encountered here." But as the Sovereign's wrath began its limping retreat toward the edge of V, the system captain Ryan Clark made a decision that would echo throughout galactic history. The alien admiral had ordered the bombardment of civilians on New Haven. He had murdered innocents who could not defend themselves. Such crimes deserved punishment. "Target the enemy flagship," Ryan ordered calmly. "Charge the main battery for a single shot." The Liberty's primary magnetic accelerator cannon began charging with a deep harmonic hum that resonated through every deck and bulkhead of the massive ship. This weapon was different from the others. It ran nearly the full length of the vessel and could accelerate projectiles to velocities that approached 20% of light speed. The energy requirements were enormous, but the destructive potential was beyond anything else in the human arsenal. Lieutenant Lisa Murphy's hands moved carefully over her targeting controls as she locked onto the fleeing Zilanian flagship. The Sovereign's wrath was badly damaged and losing atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, but it was still trying to reach the hyperspace limit where it could escape to spread word of the battle. "Main battery charged and ready to fire, Captain," she reported as the weapon's targeting system achieved perfect lock on the enemy vessel. The crosshairs on her display centered on the flagship's command section where Admiral Kethvar would be. Located Captain Ryan Clark studied the tactical display one final time. The Zilanian admiral had shown no mercy to the civilians on New Haven Colony. He had ordered the bombardment of cities full of innocent men, women, and children. Such crimes against humanity could not go unpunished, no matter what the cost. "You may fire when ready, Lieutenant," Ryan said quietly. A single tungsten projectile weighing 50 tons erupted from the Liberty's main gun. The magnetic coils accelerated it to 20% of light speed in less than 2 seconds before releasing it toward its target. The round crossed the intervening space almost instantly, leaving a brief trail of ionized particles in its wake. Admiral Kethvar saw the projectile approaching on his tactical display, but there was nothing he could do to stop it. His ship's defensive systems were designed to intercept energy weapons and missiles, not solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. He watched with grim fascination as death approached at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The tungsten slug struck the Sovereign's wrath amidships and continued completely through the vessel without slowing. It left a perfectly circular hole 3 meters wide that passed through every deck bulkhead and compartment from one side of the ship to the other. The kinetic energy transfer was so massive that it instantly vaporized everything within 5 meters of the projectile's path. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The flagship continued on its course toward the hyperspace limit as if nothing had occurred. Then structural stress from the massive hole began to tear the vessel apart. The Sovereign's wrath broke in half along the line of the impact, and both sections tumbled away from each other in different directions. Atmosphere and fluids vented into space as the two halves of the ship began their final death spiral. Emergency lights flickered and died as power systems failed throughout both sections. Within minutes, the proud flagship of the Zilanian fleet was nothing more than twisted wreckage drifting in the cold vacuum of space. The destruction of their command ship broke what remained of Zilanian morale completely. The last few dozen vessels that had not already surrendered immediately powered down their weapons and began broadcasting surrender signals on all frequencies. The battle was over, and humanity had achieved total victory. Captain Ryan Clark stood quietly on his bridge as the magnitude of what they had accomplished began to sink in. In less than 6 hours, they had destroyed or captured an entire Zilanian fleet. 300 of the Empire's best ships had been reduced to scrap metal and expanding debris clouds by a single human vessel. "Sir, we are receiving surrender transmissions from all remaining enemy ships," reported Communications Officer Ben Carter. "They are requesting instructions for prisoner transfer and asking for medical assistance for their wounded. Begin search and rescue operations immediately," Ryan ordered. "I want medical teams dispatched to every damaged vessel and full prisoner processing protocols initiated. These aliens may have been our enemies, but they are still living beings who deserve basic medical care." Lieutenant Amy Foster looked up from her tactical station, where she had been monitoring the aftermath of the battle. "Captain, what should we do about the ships that escaped? Nearly 50 vessels managed to reach the hyperspace limit and jump away before we could intercept them." Ryan nodded thoughtfully as he considered the implications. Those fleeing ships would carry news of the human victory back to the Zilanian Empire. Word would spread throughout their space that the supposedly invincible Imperial fleet had been destroyed by a single enemy vessel. Such news would have profound effects on alien morale and might inspire rebellion on occupied worlds. Let them go, he decided. They will spread word of what happened here, and that serves our purposes perfectly. The galaxy needs to know that the Zilanians can be defeated. Over the next several hours, Liberty's crew worked tirelessly to rescue survivors from the destroyed alien vessels. Medical shuttles launched from the battleship's hangar bays carrying teams of doctors and engineers to help with the wounded and trapped, despite being enemies only hours before the humans showed compassion and mercy to their defeated foes. Captain Ryan Clark retreated to his ready room to compose a message that would change the course of galactic history. For 50 years, humanity had remained hidden while the Zilanian Empire conquered world after world. They had watched from the shadows as countless species were enslaved or destroyed by alien aggression. Now the time for secrecy was over. To all free peoples of the galaxy, he began as he looked directly into the recording device. I am Captain Ryan Clark of the Terran Defense Force. For decades we have watched as the Zilanian Empire has spread across the stars like a plague, destroying everything in its path. We have seen their cruelty, their disregard for innocent life, and their belief that might alone makes right. He paused for a moment to let his words sink in before continuing. Today that reign of terror ends. Humanity will no longer stand idle while peaceful worlds burn and entire species are enslaved. We call upon all oppressed peoples to rise up against their Zilanian overlords. We call upon all free worlds to join us in liberating those who cannot liberate themselves. The recording device captured every word as Ryan delivered humanity's declaration of war against the most powerful empire in known space. The Terran Defense Force stands ready to provide whatever assistance we can to any world that chooses freedom over slavery. No longer will the Zilanians spread fear and death throughout the galaxy. Their empire ends today. When the recording was complete, Ryan turned to his communications officer. Broadcast that message on all frequencies, Ben. Make sure every inhabited system receives it within the next few hours. Use the emergency beacon network if necessary. Aye, sir. What about the Zilanian home system? They will definitely mobilize their remaining fleets once they learn what happened here. Ryan smiled grimly as he considered the alien response. Let them come, Ben. They have no idea what they are about to face. The message spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had thought possible. On hundreds of enslaved worlds, resistance movements that had been crushed or driven underground suddenly found new hope. In the depths of Zelanian labor camps, prisoners whispered of liberation and freedom. Throughout civilized space, politicians and military leaders wondered who these mysterious humans were and what their emergence might mean for the balance of power. 3 months after the destruction of Admiral Kethavar's fleet, the largest armada in galactic history dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Supreme Chancellor Vextar had come personally to oversee the complete annihilation of humanity and their homeworld. 2,000 ships spread out in perfect battle formation as they advanced toward the inner planets. The Zelanian leader stood on the bridge of his command ship and studied the tactical displays with cold satisfaction. Every available vessel in the Empire had been recalled for this operation. Battle cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and support ships stretched across space in a formation so vast that it took nearly an hour for the entire fleet to emerge from hyperspace. Supreme Chancellor, we are detecting multiple contacts in the inner system, reported his sensor officer as the fleet's advanced scouts began their reconnaissance. The humans appear to have been expecting us. Vextar's mandibles clicked with amusement as he examined the sensor readings. 50 human ships waited in formation near the orbit of Mars. They were large vessels similar to the one that had destroyed Kethavar's fleet, but 50 against 2,000 was still hopeless odds, even with superior technology. Open a channel. To the human fleet, he ordered. I want to speak with their commander before we begin the extermination. The view screen flickered to life, showing a human female in military uniform. She appeared calm and composed, despite facing impossible odds which only increased Vextar's contempt for these primitive creatures. Her name appeared on the display as Admiral Kate Nelson of the Terran Defense Force. Supreme Chancellor Vextar, I presume, she said in fluent Zelanian. I am Admiral Nelson, commanding the Sol Defense Fleet. You have exactly 2 minutes to surrender unconditionally and withdraw all your forces from this system or face complete destruction. Vextar's laughter echoed through his bridge as his officers joined in the amusement. The human female was either insane or incredibly stupid to make such demands when facing a fleet 40 times larger than her own forces. Admiral Nelson, you are either very brave or very foolish to threaten the might of the entire Zelanian Empire. I have brought 2,000 of our finest warships to end your species once and for all. Your 50 vessels cannot possibly hope to survive what is coming. Kate Nelson's expression never changed as she listened to the alien's boasts. Supreme Chancellor, you are about to discover why attacking human space was the worst mistake your empire ever made. You have 90 seconds left to withdraw. Impossible, Vextar snarled as his amusement turned to anger. Even with your superior weapons, you cannot overcome such overwhelming numbers. Mathematics alone makes victory impossible for your forces. You are about to learn that mathematics can be very misleading, Kate replied calmly. She switched to her fleet tactical channel while keeping the communication line open so the Zelanian leader could hear her orders. All ships weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth. 50 Terran Defense Force battleships opened fire simultaneously. Their magnetic accelerator cannons sent hundreds of relativistic projectiles screaming across space toward the massive alien formation. Each tungsten slug carried kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon, and they struck their targets with devastating precision. The first volley alone destroyed over 100 Zelanian ships. The projectiles punched through armor and shields as if they did not exist, while the kinetic energy release vaporized entire vessels in brilliant flashes of light. Shock waves from the impact sent nearby ships tumbling out of control as their crews struggled to understand what was happening. But this time, the Zelanians had prepared for human tactics. Instead of maintaining tight formations, they had spread their fleet across a vast volume of space, making targeting more difficult. Some vessels had been equipped with experimental kinetic interceptor systems that managed to destroy a few incoming projectiles before impact. Supreme Chancellor Vextar watched his tactical display as the battle began in earnest. His fleet was taking heavy losses, but they were also inflicting damage on the human forces. Several enemy battleships showed shield failures and hull breaches from concentrated plasma bombardments. For the first time since encountering humanity, he felt a glimmer of hope. All ships maintain dispersed formation and continue firing, he ordered over the fleet communication network. We are hurting them. Their technology may be superior, but they are still vastly outnumbered. The space around Mars became a graveyard of twisted metal and expanding debris clouds as the two fleets hammered each other with everything they had. Plasma beams and particle weapons from 2,000 Zilanian ships lit up the darkness, while magnetic accelerator rounds streaked between the formations at relativistic speeds. Admiral Kate Nelson stood calmly on her bridge as damage reports came in from throughout her fleet. The TDF Defiance had taken multiple hits and was down to 60% shield strength. 3 other battleships were reporting critical damage to their weapon systems, but they were giving far better than they got. Admiral, enemy fleet strength is down to 1,500 vessels, reported her tactical officer as another volley of human fire tore through the Zilanian formation. We have destroyed over 500 enemy ships, but they are adapting to our tactics. Continue firing all batteries, Kate ordered. Focus on their command ships and heavy cruisers. If we can break their leadership structure, the rest will collapse. Hours passed as the massive battle raged across the inner solar system. The Zilanians fought with desperate courage, knowing that defeat meant the end of their 300-year empire. They threw everything they had at the human fleet, including suicide runs by damaged vessels and concentrated bombardments that temporarily overloaded several enemy shield generators. But slowly and inexorably, the superior human technology began to tell. Every Zilanian ship that died took dozens of rounds to destroy, while human vessels could eliminate multiple targets with single volleys. The mathematical advantage of numbers meant nothing when each exchange favored the defenders by overwhelming margins. Supreme Chancellor Vextar watched his life's work crumble around him as ship after ship vanished from his tactical display. His proud fleet of 2,000 vessels had been reduced to fewer than 300 survivors. His own flagship was badly damaged, with life support failing on multiple decks. Supreme Chancellor, we have lost over 80% of our fleet. His tactical officer reported in a voice cracking with exhaustion and despair. We cannot continue this battle. The humans are destroying us faster than we can damage them. Vextar looked at the carnage displayed on his screens and finally admitted what he had been trying to deny. The Zilanian Empire was doomed. Their technology was obsolete, their tactics were ineffective, and their enemies possessed weapons beyond their ability to counter. Signal fleet-wide surrender, he ordered quietly. All ships power down weapons and prepare to be boarded. The war is over. Admiral Kate Nelson accepted the Zilanian surrender with dignity befitting a professional military officer. As the surviving alien ships powered down their weapons, she opened a communication channel that would broadcast throughout the galaxy. To all worlds under Zilanian occupation, to all enslaved peoples, to all who have suffered under imperial tyranny, she began. The Zilanian Empire is broken. Their fleets are destroyed and their leaders defeated. The age of their oppression is finally over. She paused as she looked out at the wreckage of what had been the most feared military force in known space. Humanity extends friendship to all peaceful species. We offer protection to the oppressed and justice to those who would enslave others. The galaxy is free, and it will remain free as long as humans draw breath. Across hundreds of star systems, the news spread like wildfire through hyperspace communication networks. Slave revolts erupted on Zilanian-controlled worlds as oppressed populations rose against their overseers. Puppet governments collapsed within days as local resistance movements seized control. The vast empire that had dominated the galaxy for 3 centuries crumbled in a matter of weeks. In the years that followed, historians would struggle to explain how humanity had developed such devastating military technology in complete secrecy. The answer lay in their unique approach to warfare. While other species had focused on energy weapons and defensive systems, humans had perfected the ancient art of throwing objects at their enemies with overwhelming force and precision. The day the Terran Battleship Liberty arrived at New Haven Colony truly was the day the Zilanian Empire died. But it was also the day the galaxy learned that sometimes the simplest solutions were also the most effective. Humanity had taken the basic concept of kinetic weapons and refined it to a degree that made them unstoppable against any conventional defense. As the former imperial worlds began rebuilding their shattered civilizations under human protection, one lesson echoed throughout known space. Never underestimate the species that learn to split atoms by throwing rocks at each other.